Hey everyone, it is me, it's Alex. Welcome back to the Ladies Code Collective podcast. It is quite humid today and I'm kind of just going with the flow, seeing what we get done today and hoping it all works out for the best, which it usually does because I'm pretty good at sticking to the podcast recording and editing schedules and whatnot. So today we're doing something a little bit different. Before we dive into it, just a reminder to sign up for my email newsletter at www.ladiescodecollective.com. You'll get all of my good stuff on email. You won't miss a thing. You'll know when podcast episodes come out, when my productivity cohorts are totally launched, and that's coming up on September 13th. So definitely check that out if you're interested in working with me. I'm having a 6-week productivity cohort for coding women to start, continue, or finish their coding projects. Either if you're working on something big or you just want to kind of get to work on projects that you have in your mind within a supportive, collaborative environment. Check that out also at www.ladiescodecollective.com. Check it all out. Sign up for the email list. Let's get into it. So, as I said, today is something a bit different. We are doing a Q&A, question and answer sort of episode because as I'm recording this now, I had my Codeland conference talk last week, which went amazingly, and I made so many new connections with people, especially people who had been relatively new to their coding journey, and just kind of really resonated with my talk on being utterly fearless in your pursuit of learning to code. So I actually took some of the questions that came up at the moment that I was giving the talk on. There's a post on dev.to on my profile. I can link that in the show notes and the video notes and whatnot. But I thought there were so many good questions, and I had this idea to do a sort of listener Q&A, a sort of Q&A for the opportunity to reach more people with these good questions that I got. So, without further ado, I don't know how many I'm going to get into this time around, but I definitely don't think that this will be the last question the last question and answer episode. So, just getting into it. I hope that it's helpful, and let's dive into the first question. So, the first question is, I'm interested in what resources you use to learn to code. Which programming language did I can't even talk right now. Which programming language did you learn at the start of your journey? So, for me personally, I think I've mentioned this a few times in past episodes, but I kind of did what every newbie coder does at the beginning of their journey, which is learning how to build static websites with HTML and CSS. And so to do that, I had started with Codecademy.com, and I really appreciated Codecademy because it really lays the groundwork for you in terms of really the basics. So you have this idea, okay, I want to learn how to code, but when you're first starting out, you don't even know what you don't know. And so that really helped me figure out the scope of what I needed to learn, right? So I kind of letting HTML is the structure of your website, just everything that's on your site, and then CSS is the styling. And so I had a few false starts with that before, and then once I really committed to learning to code about 1.5 years ago with learning HTML and CSS, I went the Codecademy route. I think that I started out as a free member, and then I think there may have been a sort of promotion a few months after that for their pro membership. And so I jumped on that because it was a great deal. And so I jumped on that for a year, continued on with that pro membership. I also did some intensives through Codecademy. So it's not necessarily the pro membership, but they're like, I think maybe $200 for a 8 or 10 week program, I want to say, but it was self-paced at the same time. And so I did a couple of those. I did one that was just building websites from scratch. And then that was HTML, CSS with a bit of JavaScript thrown in. And then I did another one that was building front-end web applications from scratch, and it had touched on HTML and CSS just from having to know it before, and then dove into a bit more JavaScript in React, which I was like, okay, great, I know how to do React, and then obviously didn't. So I'm still, I don't know, it just gives you that foundation to really jump in. I kind of fell away from Codecademy though after a bit of time because I was finding that it was a little bit or not as advanced as I'd like to be from a beginner perspective, if that makes sense. So I thought that I had kind of reached this point in my coding learning and journey that I didn't necessarily need that hand holding that I needed right when I was starting. And so I kind of stopped using Codecademy in favor of building things on my own and really learning JavaScript through, for example, courses on Udemy. Definitely not paying full price. I definitely wait for sales on those. But I think that's what was really helpful is using it when you really need that hand-holding, Codecademy, when you really need that hand-holding of when you're first starting out and you don't know what you don't know. But then kind of graduating from there and just seeing it through, putting one step in front of the other. And yeah, so long story less long, I am working through now JavaScript, and I think that it's going to be kind of a lifelong journey. I'm going to be diving deeper into React soon so that I can really make bigger applications that scale and kind of dip my feet into that in a more profound way. So let's move on to the next question. This one is, how did you know or realize that tutorials were a crutch for you? And do you have thoughts on how to identify your own gaps in knowledge when you're learning something new? So this question is from my talk. In response to my talk, one of the key components of my presentation was identifying your knowledge gaps and moving on from there. And so within this little nugget that I had presented, the key point was to move away from tutorials as quickly as possible because they can kind of become something that you just hold on to a little bit too, or you're a little bit too dependent on. And I realized that tutorials were a crutch when I kind of kept doing tutorials, and then as soon as I'd finish a certain tutorial, building something with a tutorial, building something along with it, I would feel like I finished it, but I wasn't happy with my knowledge with it because if you were to give me that project to do by myself, I would not know where to start. I would not even be able to really do it with that same flow that I was doing with the tutorial, which is totally normal. I think it's really a misconception that when we're learning to code, we build something with the help of a tutorial, and we think that that's enough to be able to really use that in our own portfolios and to showcase those skills as if we really have honed them and know how to use them. And so I realized that tutorials were kind of acting in this way for me just when I realized I couldn't put them together on my own. The second question is, do you have thoughts on how to identify your own gaps in knowledge when you're learning something new? And yeah, this actually goes back to using tutorials. Something that has really helped me and I've been able to close those knowledge gaps is if you're following a tutorial, once you're finished with that first round, don't just scrap it and move on to the next thing. Totally take it apart and rebuild it again without the tutorial. And not only will that just be the proof for you that tutorials really are kind of a double-edged sword, and that you're learning, but you're not really learning these solid skills, but also in that once you take that project apart, and then you tell yourself, okay, I'm on my own, you will learn so quickly where the gaps in your knowledge are. So, you might be able to set up all of the foundations of the project that the tutorial ran through, but then as soon as you start getting into more like of the programming logic, or like building different objects with different methods and how they work together, that's when you'll really know how or what kinds of gaps in knowledge you have, and then you'll be able to better identify them and really dig deeper into, okay, why am I not understanding this concept? Why is this not really clicking for me? And something else that I wanted to just quickly touch on with that question is, what is it? Oh, yeah. So if you are coding something and you're really confused on how things fit together, like different modules in JavaScript that fit together in an application, I think something that's really helpful is just handwriting the code in a notebook on a huge piece of paper. I've done that before, and really being able to see where things are fitting together. Writing it out will show you, oh my god, okay, whoa. Writing things out will show you, oh, okay, I remember writing this variable up here, so this is what's plugged in here. And that'll kind of you'll be able to really draw a map of, okay, this part of the code connects to this code over here. And it's more of a graphical, you're able to see it in a more visual sense, and that, for me, helps really put things together in the brain. Next question. How long does it take from moving away from tutorials to a point where you can actively write code from scratch? Scratch is in quotation marks, and the question asker says, I put scratch in quotation marks since programmers will never truly write it from scratch due to libraries and templates, but hopefully I got my point across. So I think this is a good question, and I think that you can start programming from scratch whenever you want, and not even just scratch in quotation marks, but really just go into your code editor and just create a little program that, it could be as simple as console logging, or logging something to the console and then getting it to show up on the DOM and the browser. Like, I think that this maybe kind of goes more into needing certain benchmarks of when it's time to move on to the next level, or when it's time to create our own projects. But really, there's no right time to do it. I talk about this so much in a lot of my episodes and so much of my writing, but there is no blueprint for how long it takes from moving away from tutorials. Like, I think that you could even, theoretically, you could learn to code without falling into like the tutorial trap. I don't know how that would work, but I feel like so many of us get just so stuck in tutorial land, or people call it tutorial hell or tutorial purgatory, that we think that there's some objective benchmark when it's time to move on from tutorials and start creating your own stuff. But I think that if you just start creating your own stuff from the get-go, and maybe you do it in conjunction with doing other tutorials, or you just really start creating things and doing different projects and building just out of curiosity. I think that's such a helpful way to learn and a very effective way to learn. So I don't think that there's any objective measurement of time about how long it takes to where you're like writing code from scratch, or you're like deciding to just go into your code editor and create something. I think that you can do that whenever you want, and probably do it before you really think in your head that you're ready to do it, because if you're waiting on that time when you feel ready, it usually doesn't ever come. Big secret, it doesn't. You got to do things before you're ready. And I'm realizing that so many of these questions are around tutorials, which is super interesting. Like, I was thinking that the presentation would be more like geared toward creativity and coding, which is probably just my brain, but there's so much about tutorials in here, which makes me believe that there's really there's a little bit of a dependence on tutorials and this, again, objective knowledge of when we shouldn't be using them anymore, when they're helpful to be used. But this question asks, what skill checks do you suggest for when to step away from tutorials, from coding tutorials? And again, I think that with the question itself, the inherent ask about like what skill check. So like kind of in my head, I have this image of, going through a rubric of, okay, so as long as we have these 3 skills, that's when we know we can step away from tutorials, which is not what I advocate for. I really think that we need to be more open, and we need to embrace the fact, or even just embrace the idea, that there is no perfect time to step away from tutorials. They definitely have a time and a place, but if you find yourself on your coding journey, having spent months learning something by following a tutorial or several tutorials, and you still don't consider yourself to have made significant progress during those few months, that's when you need to realize, I think, that you are trapping yourself a little bit in this limbo of, okay, I know the basics of programming, but I'm staying in the shallow end of tutorials because I'm not as comfortable going forward and being uncomfortable with not knowing something and having to really work hard to put the pieces of a certain puzzle together in terms of getting your code to work, getting your program to work, and having it all fit together in a nice way. And then I'm going to do one more question. And no, I think I'm not actually. I'm trying to think of, I added a lot of these onto a doc, but no, I think I'm okay. How am I on time? This is probably a shorter one. Yeah, that's actually perfect. I'm going to stop there, and I hope that was helpful. If you have questions for me that you'd like for me to discuss on another question and answer episode, or version of an episode here, you are so welcome to email me at hey@ladiescodecollective.com and put a question in there. I probably won't respond to the email itself, but I'll definitely start to track the questions I receive on any inbox. So whether that's in my email inbox or DMs on social media. But I think that it's helpful to be able to give answers on a platform that's capable of reaching more people than just individual answers to each question I get from people and followers and people wanting to connect. So again, email me any questions for a future Q&A episode at hey, Hey, at ladiescodecollective.com, and I will try to get to them on the next episode. All right, my friends, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. And we are done. Now I just gotta say bye. Bye video. I just said bye on the podcast, and so now I'm saying bye here. Same goes for you. I mean, you're obviously listening to it, but if you want me to answer any questions on another episode, email me, hey at ladiescodecollective.com. I don't edit these videos, so I'm just going to add them below in the info of this video, and you'll see it there. I think this is YouTube, so if you're seeing this video somewhere else, go on YouTube or go on my website. Okay, bye!